I mentioned a couple weeks ago, Mark of the gospel writers, he's the dragnet gospel. People of a certain age get the joke, right? Just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. Mark's, you have Matthew, Mark, and Luke have some version of this desert experience. And I just as they were singing, I flipped back to double check because Mark's in the middle. So I was looking at Luke on this page. Full page of that book is Luke's story. Mark's is like 3 sentences, right? 4 sentences. And so I just flipped back to double check. Yep, Matthew, full page. But I don't have much more to say because he said it, right? And he keeps it short and sweet. I guess the reflection I wanted to offer you as we begin this Lent in earnest has to do with the concept of the discipline of Lent. And that's a word that carries a lot of connotation for people working in a school. When you say discipline, students think trouble. They think punishment, consequence. But of course, that's just one of the things that it ends up being. But before it's that, if we look just even at the root word, in Middle English and Old French, it absolutely connoted sacrifice, scourging, mortification. Indeed, in the time of Francis de Sales, when he wrote about the discipline, what he was referring to was those little whips that they would flagellate themselves with. He said, to take the discipline was to hit yourself. It was a mortification. At the time of Francis, there were many of them, hair shirts and shirts made of like donkey hair, just things that would be really irritating to you. And that's all interesting. I don't know what else to call it. It's interesting. I assume that's all rooted in something that's trying to get to the deeper point. But the problem is it ends up being sacrifice unto itself. And that's not the point. But then more deeply, if we get off of or go more old, in Latin, it's connected to disciplina, education, and discipulus, student. It's about learning the discipline. So what are we learning in Lent? Well, I would submit to you, if we think of the sacrifice that we make, that which we gave up, I gave up coffee, I gave up sweets, I gave up drinking before noon, whatever it is that you gave up. Notice the qualification there. That's one of my smart aleck responses to people. What'd you give up? And some of us, none of your business what I gave up. So, drinking before noon. Whatever you gave up, that's great, that's fine. But again, if it's an end unto itself, then we've missed the whole point. I want to submit a word to you about the discipline of Lent that may initially sound wrong. More. The discipline of Lent is more. That we would be more focused, more hungry, more aware. But in order to do those things, to be more focused and hungry and aware, then we have to do less of something else. And that's where the sacrifice connects. And without the first more, the desire for more, then the sacrifice can end up being an end to itself. And so then the question is, what is it? Well, hopefully, when we take the things that we feed on, in every sense of the word, and take less of them, it gives us more space. More space for insight, realization, recognition, reflection, all those kinds of words, which hopefully takes us to a deeper relationship with God first, but then with each other next, logically. But to put those things out of sequence then becomes about what I'm doing for me. That's all. Just something to think about as we begin this journey. What are the ways in which we are being disciplined in Lent? Not mortified, not scourged, but taught. And again, in one sense, we don't have to completely pull them apart. That's not my goal. My goal is to bring them back together. And to say that which I take on as a mortification, something that I do give up, what is it teaching me? What's the insight? What's the recognition? Am I more concerned about justice as a result of it? Am I more engaged with my neighbors as a result of it? Or is it just a sacrifice? Again, not a bad thing, just not what I think we're talking about here. Last little insight to me was that word that says, that he was thrust into the desert by the Spirit. And that word in Greek is ekbalo, and it means to cast out. It's actually used in other spots of Scripture to cast out a demon, or that people were cast into the desert. It suggests this not your decision to do it. And we've all been there. We've all been thrust into, another way to translate that word, something that maybe we didn't feel prepared for or ready for. And this Lent becomes a discipline opportunity to take on a little bit more by giving up a little less in one category so that we can be more insightful, more recognizing of the needs and the realization of what others need and hunger for. And then we say, I can look back on the times I've been thrust into situations that I didn't feel like I was what was needed or that I had the tools to be ready for it. Because as Jesus was thrust into this experience and tempted and wild beasts, the whole 9 yards, what happens next is the proclamation and the call. As I said, Mark just moves right through, right? He goes to the desert, he's tempted, and he shows up, and it's Peter and Andrew right away. He gets moving. But he brings on his journey the insight and the realization. Not that he was sitting there saying, I don't know if I'm what's needed. He knew he was what was needed. But he did that for our sake, that we would know. We'll be thrust into situations. We will. We have been, and we will again. And we say, the one that we worship, the one that brings us here this morning, he's gone ahead of us. He was thrust into the desert. He was tempted, and he went on his way to fullness of life. So as we begin this Lent, let us think of the discipline of it. What will it teach us? In what ways are we engaging with it? In what ways was the discipline of the Lent of the last year? What has it taught us? We joked last year that was the lentiest Lent that ever lented. Afraid to tempt this Lent on what it might offer us. But here we are. Here we are, in hope, believing what Jesus told us. And so as we begin this discipline, we commit ourselves to more by doing a little less so that we can be more engaged with each other. And then it takes us right to this Eucharist so that we leave here with his presence in us. What a beautiful journey. It's not easy. It's often messy. It's tense. But it's as real as it gets. It's the engagement that the world hungers for. And so as we begin this journey, do we just take a moment to go, yeah. All right, Lord, thrust me into it. Thrust me into it for more. More awareness, more hunger, more connection to others. And he says, we'll do it. And we'll start with this Eucharist. May God be praised.